So communicate and share and recommend it to other fellow Komoot users. It's not about making exactly this tour again. Maybe the tour is equally fine doing it just the other way around, starting at point P, ending at point A, or doing slight variations. This is, well, so in we were thinking that, well, the core elements of a tour, the things that you want to talk about, things that you want to recommend to other people, are what we call highlights. Like, these are spots, or in this case, you can see these are segments that were very, very beautiful, that stand for the entire tour. This can be segments. This is also very relevant if you think about mountain bikers that are really keen on single trails, or if you think of race bikers, they like those cool asphalt streets without traffic that last for 2 hours maybe. Yeah. But there can also be points like the point 2 here. This is the nice hut where I was having my lunch. And yeah, so I took a lot of pictures, I uploaded them, and also added them to the highlights, and I also wrote some comments about it. So this is now how other people can use this kind of recommendation. Okay. Well, you can say it's a good idea to let the users participate and contribute in content on your platform, but then you also have to deal with some other problems. And one thing that we are working on is deduplication, because people go to the same places and they may create highlights over and over again that are like the same. And this is a screenshot from a very famous outdoor spot in the Harz, a nice region next to Berlin or near Berlin. And this is the Brocken actually. And it was created 7 times. Yeah. And what we are doing, like, as new highlights are coming in, we are processing them and checking if there are duplicates, and if it is like that, we automatically merge them, bringing all information together. And yeah, so one point is deduplication. The other point is, let's say, maybe a user, he thinks that the spot he has been to is very, very beautiful, but maybe it isn't that beautiful. Let's say here on the left we see St. it's difficult to read maybe. It's St. Oberholz, it's a very cool cafe here in Prenzlauer Berg or Mitte. But actually this is nothing related to outdoor. So it's a cool highlight, but nothing outdoor related. So the user didn't understand what highlights are about. The same with the second highlight, which is a terminal of an airport. Yeah. In comparison, the other 2 on the right-hand side, they are very beautiful highlights. And so, as user can contribute, you have to deal with the fact that the quality is not always as good, and you need a way to distinguish good content from bad content. And the way we do it is, well, we also collect the user feedback. So we know that a highlight was shown to people a lot of times, and if they don't interact, we know that it's not so attractive. And what we also do is, like, we're asking for explicit feedback. In this case, you can also see it. Like, we have some small thumbs up, some thumbs down, which help us getting to know if a highlight is good or bad. Yeah. So this also runs continuously in our backend, like this data processing that all the implicit and explicit feedback, we crunch it, and then we know if highlights are good or bad. Yeah. Another thing we came across is that, well, people create highlights like this one. This is a very nice peak in Austria. But in fact, there is already some content around that is very helpful for outdoor people to plan their tour. And, well, the most relevant open data we're dealing with is Wikipedia. And so as new highlights are coming in, we also check if there's some additional information already available on Wikipedia. and we attach it to our content, and people can take advantage of it. Yeah, this is what we have started with, well, yeah, 1 year ago, and it was quite difficult also to convince our users of participate in this new concept, in this new way of recommending stuff to each other. And it's also a problem because you don't really get the principle when there's no content available yet. So like this, yeah. But over the time, we really got to know how we can make people understand the value of it. And nowadays, we're very proud that we gathered a lot of user content, in total more than 50,000 highlights. And this is a collection of highlights of a user, and it's pretty awesome. And I also think it's content that has never been available yet. Like, we know a lot about many tours around that you can find on the internet, but this elementary elements of a tour, this what we call highlights, hasn't been available yet. Yeah. And this content is very fast growing, and yeah, and this is for example a map of Berlin. So if you open our web client here, you can see a lot of highlights, and you can spend hours in discovering cool places that you have never seen before, even though you live close by. And yeah. So these are the very interesting building blocks to plan your tour. You can combine highlights. You can select where you start your tour with, at which location. Yeah, but sometimes it's also yeah. But this is very cool for engaged users, people that really like to plan tours, and it doesn't. If it takes 10 minutes, it's cool. If it takes half an hour, it's even better because you can play more around with it. But they're also lower engaged user, and they say, well, highlights are cool, and I really need it to understand to make my outdoor experience. But what I really need is also a little bit more help from your side, and this is probably the most advanced data processing we are doing at the moment. We take the user data, like all the GPS traces that are connected to a highlight. So, like the highlight we are seeing on the left. Maybe we have hundreds, or sometimes even thousands of tours of our users that pass by this highlight or were near the highlight, and we are like taking all this highlight, this user data, and analyzing like what are very popular variations, how you can visit this highlight. And so like on other platforms, you can also find tours, and they may be very, very well, but often it's like this, that you have like in one special area, you have thousands of tours, and you need to click a lot. And often the tours are like what users actually tracked. So if they stay for an hour in a restaurant because they want to have lunch, you have if you want to do this tour again, you have also this lunch included. Or if somebody has to pee somewhere, you can see that the GPS trace is going somewhere else for 2 minutes. And maybe the tour starts at the home of this user. And this is something we get rid of once we understand the overall movement of our users. And yeah. So this is an example of Teufelsberg. This is a station from the NSA, but now it's not in use anymore, and it's very cool to discover. It's in Grunewald forest near Berlin, and this is a tour we suggest. We extracted it out of our user data, and you can see that it starts at point A, which is the S-Bahn station, and it takes almost 2 hours, 7 kilometers, and we give you all the informations, including the altitude profile and the weight types and the surface. Yeah, and this is not something a human being had drawn on a map or was it's totally algorithm driven, what you can see here. Yeah, and this is the end of my talk, and you've seen what has existed before, like having this tour guides, printed books, and what we think is the future. And now you know what we have done in the last year, and be excited about what we are going to do next year and what we all have in mind.
Thanks, Christoph. So far, any question? None? Okay, maybe I have one. You said actually you composed these elements of other routes. Is there any minimal way you have to have? So something like 500 meters or so? Are there certain constraints? Or can you compose such a route of elements of basically infinite length or minimum length?
Well, we can route very far routes, but we have to have a limited number of tours in a region to be able to construct a tour that we are sure about that it's a good tour. So like if there are like just 2 users in a region, they have made like 2 or 3 tours, we already can start to suggest a tour, but we aren't really sure about if it's really good or bad. And we don't want to propose bad tours, so in some regions you won't have those smart tours yet.
So you can even propose something routes to Grand Canyon where it's even 100 kilometers or so. So it's even possible then with this technology.
Yes, it's possible. And because also we are based on, well, I forgot to say that, we are based on OpenStreetMap and also take advantage of the ecosystem, and our routing engine is based on Grasshopper, which is very powerful and enable us to also do those kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Thanks again. Yeah. How's your name? Jaak? Jaak?
Yes.
Ah, okay, sorry. From Nutiteq? Yeah. Yeah, just let me quickly switch. This one, right.
Hello, my name is Jaak, and I'm switching from German to Estonian, Estnish now, because the next one will be also from the same country. I'm from Nutiteq, and I'm going to talk about standards in the actual development of mobile apps and apps around maps. First of all, what is Nutiteq? I usually had to explain Nutiteq compared to Google Maps API, but now I can say that it is like Mapbox, which is like Google Maps, but with OSM data, but with some specialties. Like we have full offline support. So actually, that's number one thing what we are selling, and what is asked is, can you make maps working offline on all mobile devices? And that's something what we have done for quite a long time. In addition to OSM, we are working a lot with third parties, so map data, like here maps, and many customers have their own map data. But out of the box, we have OSM and here. Also, we are very focused and specialized on mobile. We are doing Android, iOS, Windows Phone, Xamarin, .NET platforms. So we don't have for web, for example. Also, we have offline routing and geocoding in a beta phase. So that's also completely offline. And one specialty is 3D city. And this is a little bit related to the standards what we are trying to use, and also for 3D data there are no standards what we can use on mobile, so we had to invent our own. And we have some GIS functions like support for editing, GDAL, map data, reading platforms, projections. These are things which are used in professional applications, not end user things that much. And we have done this for about 8 years, from the times of J2ME, Symbian. Okay, older people remember this, and maybe somebody had tried even to use maps then. But what we have seen is that the explosion of the map apps on mobile has happened just recently with the latest iOS and Android phones. Then it was kind of nice hobby. And we have some customers since that time also, from end user segment, for business segment. But the topics for today, first of all, I will try to cover what is the current situation of landscape, our landscape of maps, standards, what you will see if you do web or mobile apps. Next, what is the problem with these standards for everyday developers? And I have some ideas also how to improve this situation. So what are the standards right now? There are some established formalized standards, mostly OCG things, like GML, GML for map data, VMS for map images, VFS for vector map data, and some derivatives and extensions of that. Most recent is GeoPackage from this stack. These are nice, but everyday developers don't really like them. They use it only if they need to. If there is some legacy system you need to talk to, then you use this stack. Because they are old, back from the 90s, quite heavy, very powerful, but quite painful to use, and not useful for some use cases. Then just recently, IETF has taken one project to standardize GeoJSON. That's a more modern format, what is in real use also. And let's see how this happens. That's just a few months old activity to have a formal process over that. And then there are a lot of other real use standards, what everybody is using. Like the factor standards. From OSM, there is one kind of tile service for map tiles. So everybody is using that. It does not even have a proper name. So tile API or something like that. But it's very simple, and that standard enables kind of wide choice of different map sources for any web map application. And then there is a Mapbox stack, and that has quite a few standards. Like vector tiles, first of all, these are protobuf based. But this vector tile describes only the format of the general format. In reality, you need to deal with the actual content, which has layers, tags, and this is not standardized. So there is also kind of convention what people are using. But if you look, for example, maps and tiles through the eyes of Mapbox, then you get quite empty map, because they are both vector tiles in Mapbox vector format, but the content is different enough that only some of the data is visible. That's the same map data from Mapzen itself. Okay, I wouldn't give really a design award for this map, but you can see it has actually much more data than you can see immediately. And the problem is that it's the same standard, same file formats, but actually the data is different enough that you don't even notice immediately that something is wrong, some details are missing, and you cannot really read the data unless you know some very detailed insights or detailed specifications of that. Okay, some other things like MB tiles, tile JSON, to describe tile layouts, UTF-Grid for creating interactions or interactive data, that's mostly web-oriented. And then there are about 4 different styling languages, like the oldest one, Mapbox XML. Later on, Cartos CSS was popular. Now there is a WebGL-based GL styling with the latest Mapbox Studio. And yeah, then there is also simple style, kind of styling embedded to GeoJSON files. So 4 different formats for styling maps. all from Mapbox. So quite interesting situation. There are some other standards like from CartoDB. There is a torque tiles. Yesterday there was a speech about that. There are some other vector tile formats, but mostly they have given up and moved to Mapbox format. And then there are offline map packages. Well, we are dealing with offline maps every day, so we are, in various projects we are using GraphHopper offline files which are working fine on Android. MapsForge is a popular vector rendering engine. They have own formats and you can see the files. Maps.me has recently open sourced their software, and there are also tools to create compact map data packages. And there are some upcoming areas. Geocoding and routing is not something very common in offline world, and new package formats will be created there probably in addition to these previous project-specific ones. Then there are also in-device APIs. Most common is Google Maps API, and to create kind of easy switchover possibility, many, like Mapbox for example, uses exactly the same API, so you can switch over from Google Maps to some third-party maps as easily as possible. In Nutiteq we don't use this API actually, because Google, that's the same problem. There is one vendor, but yeah, I'm coming to the problems with this vendor-based APIs. About location intelligence or business intelligence with location data, there, I'm not very good specialist on that, but I see similar patterns. There are some things which are vendor specific, but if you try to use different tools with the same data, then it is not very easy. So, and about navigation standards. Yesterday there was NDS talking about that. They are big and heavyweight and expensive. So yeah, I'm skipping this here. And what are the issues? They are very active in development, so they are changing very fast. So unstable and incomplete doesn't mean anything necessarily bad, but it is just changing all the time. And if you're following a standard, then it's very difficult for you. They are not very open, so there is kind of original vendor lock-in. If you're using someone else's standard, you don't have any control over that, and you're yeah, it can be quite tricky. You can make extensions of that, and typically if you ask that something needs to be extended or you need something differently, then you can post a pull request and some original vendor is kind of free to ignore it. So that's quite common pattern in many cases, which creates forks, and forks are not very good in this world. And some of the standards become unmaintained. I think this Carto's CSS is a little bit like that this is still actively in use, but I think CartoDB, not CartoDB, Mapbox was original creator of that, but they don't use it anymore that much. So it's kind of in an orphaned standard. So yeah, it's quite a mess. But to resolve it, I have some ideas also. So idea is to agree how to handle these standards which are used by more than one party somehow together. So with several parties and somebody neutral enough to decide the disputes, possible conflicts of extension systems, for example. So organizationally, something keep it simple and flexible. These normal standard systems like OCG or IETF and others are typically quite big and heavy and not good for active development. And yeah, the key is to avoid kind of single party lock-in there. And technically, a couple of ideas. One is to use continuous integration style of testing for describing standards. Like ISO has a nice test suits or OCG, but they are very heavy. It creates simpler automatic tests. and optimize the process for development speed, not for 100% description, but to keep it also flexible. And the next steps, first of all, to have some feedback. I try to collect it myself. Is it kind of good idea even? Is there any example of working model which can be used in this area also? And then agree with the key players who are providing the standards. To have some discussion medium, and basically the idea is to create some meta standard, how to describe standards and how to keep them working to keep all the parties happy. In both technical level, actually Mapbox has quite nice pattern how to describe their APIs. They are all in GitHub as a project. But to have also organizational level on top of that. And maybe by the end of the day, we'll have some kind of stamp on the standards that this is compliant to agreed set of rules. And something like in software, you have OCI compliance. And then execute and improve. And yeah, that's all. One screenshot from our application, which uses some navigation and vector map engines. So please contact me if you see that there is a point of that. If not, then also. and let's see where we can go with that.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Jaak. I think many topics that you described at the end really much sounding also the idea of the association we are creating. So you're heavily invited to also join us, right? And I really liked also the idea of having a kind of an RFC board, or would it be something you have in mind, right? Yeah, I think that's something we also creating then. Maybe it's a good idea, right? Any other questions? So no one has problems with standards, right? Oh, Roland, okay.
One of the ideas is sometimes also that we store the world sometimes multiple. There is one solution which has its own geodata, for instance, the mobile phone, and if we take a country, it might be 1 gigabyte or 500 gigabyte, and if I would take another application with the very same or a little different application, they store again same world or same country again on this phone. Okay, having 16, 23 or 32, 44 gigabyte is one solution, simply have a double. One of the ideas also, because of the storage, has some limitation, but also if there are a lot of basis things, is there an idea to introduce, for instance, something like a geo-content provider? So for those who are not so in Android, there is a special concept, the database system for on this solution, on this platform. They're called content provider. It's a special API, heavily used in other W, like the calendar for the where, sorry, for the when, the contact for the who, and for the where, currently there's a lack. So each of the providers need to have its own storage in its data. Also, there could be a possibility to introduce, let's say, a certain data level where you can, let's say, have different applications on top using the same data source on the same mobile, which could be maintained only once a night, saying a service once a night. And because there are a few people also here, like Thilo Mühlberg, he's also one of the MapForge people. He's the founder of MapForge. He did not say it directly, but he's also very close. Would it be something like you can say, okay, there's a platform like mobile, which is something, you are one of the leads here and also others, where we can think about the data level, because this is something on the application side it's difficult, specific, but on the data resource level, which is on the one hand side you introduced the map format earlier, quite early, because you at that time the restrictions on the mobile phones 2006 or 2007 was quite heavily. Today it's not a problem to store a complete country or even Europe. Would this be a level like through the industry to integrate to have the same data storage?
Yes, and possibly that's something what Tile API has enabled in web. You can use same client and a lot of different data sources for that. And in vector, it's more tricky. I had this example of the web vector tiles, but it can be resolved. And maybe not only maps, also geocoding, routing, this kind of common things can be unified.
On mobile phone level, not on internet level?
Yeah.
On Android level?
Yeah, on system itself. Yeah.
This is a pretty technical issue, but this could be something as a working level a lot of people can participate in. I don't know, that's the point.
I think maybe it's worth also have this as a follow-up discussion then, right? Yeah, because I think there are many ideas and maybe also possible solution. I don't know, would be cool. Yeah, thanks again, Jaak, for the presentation. And we have our last speaker. Oh, okay.